Hello, everyone. Welcome to Crow Canyon Software's webinar on using NITRO Studio to move off InfoPath forms. We'll get going in a minute. And first, I want to cover a few housekeeping kind of things. There, in your screen, there is a question box. So feel free to go ahead and put in any questions. We'll try and answer them during the webinar. If we don't get to them during the webinar, we'll be sending out an email after the webinar to answer your questions about it, or you can contact us directly at the, you can see here in the bottom left are some contact information, the phone number and email address, and we can always send questions there or call us up and we'll get to your questions there. But let's get going on the webinar. We have a lot to cover and it's a very interesting topic, so let's go. I am Scott Restivo, the president and CEO of Crow Canyon Software. We've been in business 20 years. This is our 20th year. We started in 1999, been going strong. One thing I also want to point out about housekeeping, I guess I should have done this earlier, but here it is. There is a place you can download in your webinar screen, two handouts if you're interested in those. One's a data sheet and one's a case study. Those should be ready available in your screen. I'll go from there. So let's talk about NITRO Studio first, and then we'll get into InfoPath replacement as a NITRO Studio as a way to replace InfoPath. Yeah, NITRO Studio is an application creation platform for SharePoint and Office 365. We use it, you can use it to power up your SharePoint and Office 365, create flexible applications, and build the applications to meet your specific needs. You'll see during this webinar, if you're not familiar with NITRO Studio already, that there are many powerful tools within the NITRO Studio for forms, workflows, and other aspects, because we've been developing applications for, like I said, about 20 years now, and on SharePoint for the last 10 or 15. And we realized that we needed a lot more power in SharePoint. So we built these web parts and add-ins and tools, and we call that the NITRO Studio. And now it's what we use to build our applications and also to give you an opportunity to do custom development. So as most of you know, SharePoint has a number of capabilities right out of the box. You know, it's a good platform to start with. And when I say SharePoint, I mean on-premises and Office 365 SharePoint. It has site collections, lists and libraries, columns, and integrate. It's okay place to start, but it needs more. And as we built our applications that became in real use throughout the world in many different organizations around the world, you know, thousands of organizations around the world are using our applications. We realized that we needed to add on a lot more to SharePoint to make it into a true business platform. And that includes forms, portals, workflows, columns, email sync, report, all these different things that SharePoint does not have out of the box. And that's, as I said, it consolidated that into the NITRO Studio. And that NITRO Studio here forms a layer on top of SharePoint and Office 365. It has forms and portals, workflows, processes, reporting, and analytics. And from that, we can build our business applications. And that's what we did for many years. And the past few years, we made NITRO Studio more into a product that can be purchased and utilized on its own. And from that, we can do our custom development, but more importantly, you can do your own, build your own applications. It's become and it's becoming even more a very powerful application creation platform for SharePoint Office 365. And you'll see a lot that can be done with it in terms of forms, workflows, and all the other aspects of an application. So in our world of Crow Canyon, we build these applications, and like I say, these are being used by many organizations throughout the world. You know, more standard core business applications that help desk, asset management, customer support, work orders, and facilities. And you know, these can be tied together where help desk and assets are used together, or work order and equipment, onboarding. There's employee request manager, contract renewal, purchase order and requests, or check vouchers, all kinds of things. And for instance, HR requests and request manager can become leave request program, or they can become a user access program. Now, we are going to talk in this webinar about InfoPath replacement. And one aspect of that I can interject right now is that you could replace whatever InfoPath form you have, maybe one of your workflows, one of your applications, with one of our applications right here. You know, you don't necessarily have to convert the form. You just say, well, we're done with InfoPath. We're going to jump on Crow Canyon's train here and use one of their products here, and then it's good to go right out of the box. Now, I realize a lot of the InfoPath forms are for specific purposes, and maybe they don't fit into these particular categories. But I just wanted to point out that if you do have a situation with InfoPath forms where you're using it for like an request management or HR request or leave request or something, you can most likely come in and use one of our pre-existing programs without the hassle of developing anything on your own, and then have our support and our ongoing upgrades and everything. So to use that to replace your InfoPath form, that's one direction that you can go in with InfoPath replacement. But you can also use our NITRO Studio to build your own applications. We can do some of that for you, or consultants can, but anybody who's a so-called power user, citizen developer, kind of what they call it these days, can use our NITRO Studio low code, no code to build applications or do forms or do workflows that are necessary and to move your business along. Well, let's take a closer look at NITRO Studio, then we'll get into the InfoPath replacement part of this thing. So the NITRO Studio, we focus on 3 areas that are critical to any application, and these are: you need to have a UI and UX that engages and empower users. You need to have workflows and business processes that streamline and automate your whatever work you're doing, whether it's approvals or ordering something, whatever. You need workflows and business processes that have to be streamlined, automated, and then at the end you want reporting and analytics so you can drive continuous improvement. So our NITRO Studio has all those elements in it. This is what we needed to build our applications, and therefore we put it into the NITRO Studio. And when you get the NITRO Studio, you get all these things with it so that you can take whatever part you want to build your own application as needed, whether you want to do that to replace InfoPath forms, or you just have a new need right off the bat. Like, you may not even have an InfoPath form. Maybe you're doing something in spreadsheets, you're doing something in email, and you just want to go ahead and automate and streamline that process and make it into an application running on SharePoint and Office 365 and get going, get more efficiencies going on that way in your business. So NITRO Studio can be used for InfoPath replacement, or it can be used more generally for creating any kind of application on top of SharePoint and Office 365. Now let me iterate SharePoint. I mean SharePoint 2013, SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2019 on premises, and anything in Office 365. I've left SharePoint 2010 behind. It just was not enough modern capabilities in it. So 2013, 2016, 2019, but more importantly, Office 365, we're doing a lot of work in. Now, at this point, before we launch into the replacing InfoPath section of this webinar, I did want to pop up two polls, if that's okay with everybody. And they are, one is on what version of SharePoint you're using, and one is where you're at in your InfoPath replacement. So let's do the what version of SharePoint are you using right now poll. I'll launch that. Okay, we got just about everybody voted there. Collecting response. I'll close the poll. It looks like most, 2/3 people on 2013, 2016, and more or less the other parts are on, the other portion more or less is on SharePoint Online, with a few people on 2019 and a few people on 2010 or earlier. So it seems like most people are on premises 2013, 2016 with nearly equal amount of SharePoint Online. Okay, the second poll is, and this will be the last one, so is where are you at with your InfoPath replacement project? Just so we can get an idea of if where you're at in it. So I'll let that run for maybe half a minute or so too. Okay, thank you for answering that. And it's what I suspected, which is that most people are in the very preliminary information gathering stage of InfoPath replacement projects. And that makes sense because there's still not too many people that we've talked to at, we go to trade shows and we talk to customers all day, have really launched into a full-scale InfoPath replacement project. So I think a lot of people are at the stage you're at, which is most of you indicated you are at, which is very preliminary, or just doing, been doing research and might be ready to get going soon. So let's see if I can, this webinar can be helpful with you in this, as you move forward into InfoPath replacement. So replacing InfoPath forms. Here's what Microsoft said April, over a year ago. So it's been well over a year, and they've been saying this for some time. If you're using InfoPath, now's the time to start thinking about migrating your forms to other solutions. So I just put that there because that was a year ago they were saying that. And if anything, they're emphasizing this even more now. And I would say it's not only the time to start thinking about it, it's the time to start exploring solutions and moving in that direction. The time is now, in other words, to get going on this. So here's the end of support for InfoPath, the latest from Microsoft. InfoPath 2010, the mainstream support has ended, and extended support ends a year from this October. 2013 will go into 2 years from this July, and then extended support ends when the extended support for SharePoint 2016 ends, which is July of 2026. But that doesn't mean you have that long to go. I mean, really, you got to look at it, probably get going now, and within 2 years, you want to be off InfoPath forms. Most people probably on InfoPath 2013. If you're on 2010, you definitely want to be off it sooner, in the next year or so, or less. And InfoPath 2013, you want to be moving, you want to be off 2 years. It means better time to get moving is now on the InfoPath replacement. And why? Why replace InfoPath forms? Well, you probably all know this if you're on this webinar, but the lack of mobile-friendly responsive design, the outdated look and feel, it doesn't support the modern UI. It's a pre-cloud technology, which is seen as a little clunky in the programming world because it uses kind of cumbersome file structure. It's no longer, this is probably the most important, it's no longer being developed by Microsoft. It has not been developed and improved for 2013. That's 6 years ago. So this is like, they're supported, but they don't do any more new development on it at all. It's starting to face limited compatibility with the newest browsers, Edge and Chrome, as they develop and come with new iterations of those browsers. The older clunky technology doesn't work as well, and there start to be difficulties. And then there's the problem of connecting to other sources and data sources. You know, what happened in 2013 isn't necessarily what's, modern interfaces to connectivity and interaction with databases that they have now. So you can learn, we have a website with InfoPath replacement information there. We go into more detail on it. So the first thing about replacing InfoPath forms is this, and this is pretty straightforward. Stop creating new ones. It sounds easier to do than it is, maybe, but really you should don't dig yourself any deeper into the InfoPath world. It's time to stop doing that. And I actually did talk to people, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and they're saying, oh yeah, we're still creating InfoPath forms. I'm like, why? Don't do that, because you're just gonna make your migration that much more difficult in the future. So I'd say put that as rule number one. Stop creating InfoPath forms. The rule number two is start looking, or better yet, find tools that work to replace it. Now, if you look at this screen, you'll notice that NITRO Studio is at top, and hey, I admit it, I'm pumping up NITRO Studio a little higher. It is our webinar and it's our tool, but I did that just because here we're at Crow Canyon, so we put it up there. But there are other tools. There's Power Apps and Flow, Nintex, K2, others. There's a number of tools out there. So you want to do your due diligence to find out what works and what you're comfortable with, and what time to start looking before you get down to the crunch time of InfoPath replacement, is to find what tools are going to do it for you. And the other point about this slide, it isn't one or the other. For instance, our NITRO Studio works with Flow and Power Apps. And we can use Nintex workflow. I mean, it's like it isn't one or the other necessarily. At least from my NITRO Studio point of view, I know that we integrate with Power Apps and Flow. We can integrate with Nintex stuff. So it's not mutually exclusive that you have to go choose one and can't use any of the others once you make that choice. We can talk to you more about that as we go along and you look at it. Okay, then as you move into this project, you want to know what InfoPath forms you have. You want to catalog the forms. You can do it manually if you have a very small amount of forms, maybe 10 or 20 or something like that, and maybe even more. You can just get a spreadsheet and figure out what you have and see what's there, do a manual catalog. But there are automated tools that will go in and query your SharePoint system and find out what's in there. There's MetaLogic, which was bought by Quest, so it's now Quest Expert, which is a free tool. Rencores, SP Transformator is a paid-for tool, and other ones in there. Also, once you have the catalog, you want to refine it. And the important point here is when you have the catalog of the forms, you want to get rid of the ones you're not using, put it bluntly. So fewer forms equal less work of migration, obviously. So you want to consider, should the InfoPath form be archived, updated, rebuilt, or simply left behind because no one's using it? And you can look at usage statistics and see, is the form being used? And if so, how much, by whom? And maybe talk to that department. You just do a refining of the catalog so you can eliminate a lot of the overhead. Now, just do it as an aside here. It's an interesting aside. I was talking to somebody at one of the shows recently. I think it was Las Vegas or DC, one of those recent shows that we went to in May. I don't know. And the guy came up and he said, this isn't InfoPath, but he was using Lotus Notes, and they've been using it for like 15 or 20 years. He said they had 325,000 Lotus Notes databases. 325,000. I couldn't believe it. He said, oh, then we refined it and we came down to 1,200, only 1,200. They were down to only 1,200 database. And in Lotus Notes, a database is kind of like an application. So they only had 1,200 to deal with. Instead, it's 325,000. So, well, still a real lot to deal with. But the point there is to refine the catalog and not just move everything over en masse from one old InfoPath to the new, and that's pretty obvious. So let's take a look at, outdated and rarely used forms do not need to be replicated. Sounds simple, but obvious, but we got to remember that. You don't have to replicate stuff you're not using or it's outdated. Okay, here I wanted to show a screenshot of the SB Transformator from Rencor and show kind of things you can get out of it. Of course, this is a paid for tool. Rencor, we're buddies with them. We see them at all the shows and go over and chat with them and everything. So they have this tool, InfoPath Forms, and you can see that it's pulling out some information and giving you some details about it and usage statistics. So if a tool like that is useful for you, talk to us, talk to them, and we'll see if that can be put in place to give you an analysis of what's there and help build the catalog. Another partner we have is Fusion No Code Solution. That's the guys in Denmark. And he can extract, his tool, their tool, can extract InfoPath data and push it to SharePoint lists or databases. So that's a way to use archiving. If you're not going to, you need to archive the InfoPath data, you can use Fusion No Code Solution, our partner's tool, pull it all out and stick it someplace, whether in another SharePoint list with all the right columns and fields created for you, or just put it into a database such as Excel or SQL, Excel, Power BI, you can put it all these different places. It's taking the data out and putting it this other place for archiving. And also, another way, this is another way to use this data extraction tool from them is to put it into a SharePoint list and then use the NITRO Studio on top to build the forms on top of it in the workflows. The thing is, it pulls the data out and sticks the data over there in that SharePoint list with all the right columns, but does it create the forms? No, it doesn't create the forms. Does it create the workflows? No, but the data is there. And then with NITRO Studio, just come in and put a form on top of it and put a workflows on it, and you're good to go. So it's, at least kind of considerations to go into. And we're Crow Canyon's working. We have our stuff. We have our partners Rencor. We have partners this No Code Solution and other people. We have consultants. So we're deep into this stuff, and we can help you out if you are going in this direction with how to replace InfoPath and make it as easy as possible. Okay, once you have cataloged the forms and refined the catalog, get rid of the forms you don't need, next thing is review the catalog, and this is where it really comes down to how much work is it going to be to move this stuff from InfoPath to whatever new solution you're going with. Well, that is an interesting question, because one thing you have to look at is the flexibility, meaning how closely do the InfoPath forms need to be replicated in the new environment. And surprising to me as I've done this work is that sometimes they have to be replicated exactly. Down to where the checkbox is located and has 0.00 in the cost box instead of just plain 0. All kinds of stuff that surprised me how detailed. And then I went and talked to the people who were demanding or insisting that the form had to be absolutely the same, and they brought up some good points. One of them had a form used by 1,000 people. So if you move the checkbox, inch to the left or something, they have to retrain everyone, and the manager did not want to retrain 1,000 people on where the checkbox is that used to be over to the right is now over to the left. Okay, that's understandable, right? Other forms have been designed by committee, and therefore they don't want to go through the process of, understandably, go through the process of reorganizing that committee to come up with a new form if they can change. So look, we already went through the whole process before. We're just going to replicate what they already decided on in the new solution. And these are the challenges presented to us in our NITRO Studio. Can you do that? And I'll show you some examples of forms in a few minutes of where we have done that. There's also bureaucracy requiring the form to be a certain way. We're working with a university right now, and we looked at it and said, well, why don't you just make it easier to do this way? Well, the registrar of the university requires the form to be exactly like that. There's no question. That's how it has to be, whatever reason, legal reasons, whatever. And that brings us to the top there about regulatory and compliance concern. The forms may need to look exactly that way for other reasons. So how much flexibility do you have, and does the tool you're going to adopt, whether it's our stuff, NITRO, or you're using other tools, is it going to be able to meet those demands of the flexibility? Of course, the more flexible it is, the better, because that brings us to the next thing below called new features. And new features means that why would you want to replicate it exactly, other than because of those concerns up above, if adding new features in due to the new technology will give you more capabilities, in it, such as more mobile-friendly form instead of paper-friendly, more database connectivity, pulling information in from a database that couldn't be done previously, and things like that. So, there's these are the thing where it just takes an internal kind of review of your forms, not necessarily all of them, but the ones that are most used, and say, what can we do here? Does it have to be exactly the same? Can we add new features in? What about the changing needs of the department? Does the existing form still meet their needs? What can be added, removed, and more automated? Because our drive here is for more automation, more capabilities, more efficiency, more productivity, not just to get InfoPath forms from one to the other blindly, but to do it in a way that replaces InfoPath, but not just replaces, but improves upon what InfoPath, better. You're making your organization better by this. So it's not just replacing InfoPath, it's the fact that that was a technology that was last developed in 2013, and now we're 2019, and it's a different world with mobile and cloud. Technology's changed a lot, and there's a lot of new features that can be added in that would enhance the the process or automation of whatever you're doing there, whatever it is, a request form, an approval form, access form, whatever it is, or purchase order form or something like that. There's new ways of doing things. So that's what Review the Catalog is all about. And as you do this, you also have to deal with the cultural and user adoption issues. That's why I was just talking about how there may be a certain intransience or inflexibility that you have to contend with, or more like, as they say, the devils we know versus the angels we haven't met, in the way that we're used to doing things a certain way, and we're not so amenable to change, even though that change would be better in the long run. I mean, I could wax philosophical about it, but that's not the point of this webinar. The point is that that's one of the issues we have to contend with when moving from InfoPath to newer forms, is that there's a certain organizational resistance, you might call it, or inertia in there. And this MVP, Mark Anderson, who's active in a lot of the shows, lives up in the Boston area. The most difficult barrier, he says, is people, not technology. And that's probably true in a lot of cases. And people want to use what they know. And even when you do get newer tools in, those newer tools may require a different way of doing things or different ways of thinking. I mean, which is good, actually. But for getting people to see that it's good is sometimes a little bit of a uphill climb there. So that's one of the things you have to deal with. But that's something I'd be interested to talk to people about individually, and see what their issues and what they've encountered with. I find that kind of interesting, how we resist change. I had a 2012 Civic, for years. I just bought another car, and all of a sudden this new car has all these new cool stuff in it. It's got a rear view camera. Of course, it had a rear view mirror, but a rear view camera. It's got a push button start. The phone connects by Bluetooth. All stuff wasn't in my 2012, but I was so stuck on the 2012 Civic that, I don't know, then I finally, got old enough that I changed it, and now it's all this new cool technology. And that's, I hope, what your users would find when they move from InfoPath to something else. Hey, you can do this stuff on a mobile device. You can, the phone will automatically load some information from a database that it didn't previously. There's other kinds of automation. So, how do you bring in those new, exciting new features to show them and help them, entice them to move off of the old into the new? It's an interesting question, is, to do that, but that's one of the issues you have to deal with. Okay, so now we're talking about moving off InfoPath. By now you have, well, hopefully anyway, stopped creating InfoPath forms. You started getting familiar with the tools to replace InfoPath. You have a good sense of what needs to be evolved, what needs to be replicated, how much work is involved. How do you make the move, right? Well, everybody's situation is very different, and that's something where we have to talk to people individually. I'm very glad to do that, very happy to do that. But here's a kind of framework that we came up with here, and let's look at this slide. 3 different approaches to moving off InfoPath. And after this, we'll get into the NITRO forms and start showing you that. But the first way is to go into the toe in the water approach. Okay, experiment with NITRO forms or whatever tool suits you. We're doing a NITRO webinar here, so of course I'm talking about NITRO Studio. Anyway, so experiment with NITRO forms. See what it takes to recreate an InfoPath form. Play around a little, get a good sense of what can be done and cannot be done. Get a trial of NITRO and see what you can do. Challenge us with a form and say, hey, here's a form. We have somebody sending us samples of 5 forms. Say, can you do this? Can you do that? And see what's possible. So you get familiarity and a sense of what it's going to take to go from what you currently have to what is the new way of the future. Another approach, these kind of segue into each other, though you could just go straight to the wait and slowly, which is to change one of the InfoPath forms to NITRO right away, or whatever tool you want to use. But you can change one of the InfoPath forms and just say, okay, I know what this one does. It's a user access request form, so I'm just going to change it to a NITRO form and put it in production and see what happens, and then adjust as needed going forward and pay close attention to user feedback. And then from there, you can say, okay, we had success with one InfoPath forms transition. Let's try, take on more and more and more, and then build some momentum in that direction. So sometimes it starts with the toe in the water, then it goes into the wait and slowly. And then most people aren't going to dive right in until they've done steps 1 and 2. If you do want to dive right in, it's probably if you only just have a few forms and workflows and the company's chomping at the bit to move ahead quickly. Then you can work closely with us for migration success. So I think most people right here on this webinar from the survey I did, poll I did earlier, are kind of in the toe in the water. Some people are wading in slowly, more or less like kind of 75-25 in that respect. So, we're here to help you out with that and know the tools, help you understand what NITRO can do, and also other tools, Power Apps and Flow, what they can do and how we can integrate them and help make your migration from InfoPath to the newer technologies more smooth and painless as possible there. So now back to NITRO Studio. I hope this information has been useful, and please contact us anytime, call us up or email, and we will be glad to tell you about this, or see us at shows. We'll be at the New York SharePoint Saturday in the end of July, at the Seattle conference in August. A lot of fall shows in the fall, or just email us and we'll talk to you. It's very interesting, a very interesting subject for us, and quite fascinating to work with people on. Okay, let's go over to NITRO again. Back to NITRO. Let's talk about this earlier. NITRO Studio, as I said, is an application creation platform created by Crow-Canyon Software to enhance your SharePoint, whether on-premises or Office 365, to help you build really important and critical business applications, or help you streamline and automate and make your organization run more productively and get off the old legacy programs, whether it's InfoPath, Lotus Notes, Access Forms, or spreadsheets or email or some other thing that needs to be replaced with a more efficient process here. And we have these 3 areas of the UI UX with the forms and portals and other aspects of it. We have the workflows and business processes with all the approvals and notifications, all those kind of things. And we have the reporting with analytics that you go back and look and say, how long it take to approve this request and all, et cetera, et cetera. So let's take a look at this. Okay, this NITRO forms. There's supposed to be another box here. I don't know what happened to it. Anyways, there's supposed to be another box here, but there's a lot of ingredients in NITRO forms that make them very powerful. We'll go right into that in the demo in about 5 minutes. Oh, here it is. It showed up. Great. I don't know. Some of the animation's a little wacky there. So there's NITRO forms, and they're dynamic, responsive. They have tabs and sections, table layout, cascading lists, linked on. I mean, we put a lot into this forms designer, because that was demands of our applications that we provide to these organizations around the world. They need all this stuff. And so therefore, it's available to you in NITRO Studio as part of the forms designer when you build your own applications and replacing InfoPath forms or just building new solutions or whatever you're doing. We also have workflows and actions that can trigger a series of events, and these, send email, update an item, add, move, copy an item, invoke SharePoint workflows, other NITRO workflows, invoke Microsoft flows. We just did a webinar where we said NITRO workflows and Microsoft Flow are BFF, best friends forever. It's a webinar for on demand on our website if you're interested. You can run a script, web service, PowerShell command, generate documents, generate printouts, set permissions, query list, all the things that are necessary to move a process along. And implicit in this is a set of approvals too. I guess I could put that on the list, but it's implicit in here is a whole approval process goes on too. So all these things are what make streamline and automate processes possible, is by using the workflows along with the forms that I just talked about. And then not only NITRO Studio that, there's many other features of NITRO Studio. I don't want to just say it's forms and workflows. This is what makes it a full application creation studio, a suite, a platform. Has reporting, email integration, printing, application portals, AI services now. We're getting more into that with chatbots and NLP, natural language processing. Modern UI, fully compatible to modern UI, conditional formatting, branding, lister. I mean, many, many features in our NITRO Studio, which can help you build those applications there. So that's what we got going on here. Okay, now I'm going to switch over to a demo and start showing you some of the features of NITRO Studio. I'll get this out of the way and move this over. First of all, I want to show you some forms we've created in NITRO Studio. Some of these are pretty prosaic, as we say, or a little ordinary, but they came from forms that they gave us to replicate. So this is what we did. We replicated the form, and you can see that using NITRO Studio Forms Designer, you can really lay it out pretty precisely according to what is needed here. So this is just one example with the lines, the boxes, the different, this all came from the form that we were given in order to replicate. Now let's go through a few of these. Here's another one, service access request form. By the way, I just want to switch back to the other one and notice the signature box here, which can be signed on a mobile device or on your, like this, right? So here, service access request form with different, calendars and yes/no boxes. Of course, these can be dynamic. If you say yes to this, it could open up something below, or no to that. It could have cascaded lookups. It can pull information from a database in here to preload the form. Here's a data access request, showing that we can easily put some color on here and put information in here. This is all adapted to what the form was required previously. So you can see we can make up these really interesting. This one required 4 signatures. Really interesting forms that match the requirements of whatever form is currently in InfoPath or paper or whatever, spreadsheets or something. Let's go access card reader. Here's an interesting one with this information here, just showing off some of the forms gallery more or less here. Information access request, one right here. Okay. These all forms. How are these done? You might be asking that question, right? So we go to our NITRO Studio, collection of the web parts and the many different add-ins that I talked about earlier. So we'll go to NITRO Forms specifically, that one part of NITRO Studio, and take a look at the list where we list like access requests, for example, and see what that looks like. So in the NITRO Forms Designer, so WYSIWYG Form Designer, you can come in. Did I go to the wrong spot? Okay, let me go get another form. The WYSIWYG Form Designer, you can go in and see it in real time, what it looks like. Let's see. Let's just do the access card request. Okay, it's going to build it's going to load the Forms Designer. So here we have that same form that we're looking at, the access card request. Here it is in real, published. Here it is in our Forms Designer. You can see it's a WYSIWYG layout, and you can come in and use all these controls over here on the side to build this form. Now, if I was going to go into this NITRO Form Designer, you'd be here for another hour talking about how much cool stuff you can do with it, and I would be glad to do that. We do a lot of one-on-one demos. That's what we do a lot of times with NITRO and with our application. But there's a lot here that's going on, and I don't, in this webinar, I'm just going to kind of lightly touch it and hopefully get some interest going where you might want to do a trial or talk to us about a live demo. So you can do a lot of stuff here. You can set columns. You can do, just a lot going on here. Even notice if you you look at advanced, you can add your own custom JavaScript if you want. You can put actions on here if you want, like custom actions, to cause something to happen up there, either here or in a different place. And those actions would run one of our custom actions or workflows. There's a lot you can do with this. designer. Now, what we've also done is, if I go back here, cancel this, then you publish it and it gets published to that list. I'd be glad to show, any of us here at Crooked, I'd be glad to show you details of this forms designer. It's quite capable and quite interesting to work with. Let me see if this tickets one has more to it. That I think one of our guys was going colorful crazy here with the table designer. Let's see if it's still looking like that on the ticket form. Yeah, here you go. So this is showing some of the new features in our NITRO designer, where you actually have a table here and you can set up a table. And then you can line everything up very precisely as how many columns and rows and colors and layout you want here. Very, very, very high degree of control over what you can do. That's using this table designer. So you have a table, you might make up a table here of certain amount of cells and this, and then once you have that table the size you want, you just can drag it over to here. And now that table has all those different things there. You can move columns around. You can add a new column in. I mean, so much you can do with this to make it precise, and that's how you come up with these forms that we're talking about over here that look the way they look, because we're controlling the colors, the layouts, what the labels are. There's a lot of conditional work going on. Many ways of working this. A column already exists. Okay, you can also go here and merge cells. Let's see if I go here, merge cells, columns, merge two columns. Let's just merge two columns. Now you have another column merge. I mean, this is what gives the power in our NITRO Studio. One of the elements to make the design able to replicate the InfoPath forms pretty exactly as needed in there. Now, you can have these in two columns. There's many things you can do. You have different tabs, different sections. You can make it two columns. You can really have a huge degree of control over what this form will look like. And you can also have it a different new form, and then when it comes up with new, a different edit form, a different display form. You can add controls to it, any of the controls from the SharePoint list. You can add external data columns and decide, pull information from a database to show up on the form. You can add a signature pad. You can add associated items. We have repeating rows, like in a purchase item. You add another item, another item, another item, or a time tracking or whatever. You can have, the linked items. You can autofill from Active Directory. You can have lookups where it's making in cascaded lookups on the form, so that you can have, category and issue type or triple layers or whatever number you want. It's like category and type, I think, are probably linked right here. That's probably a cascaded lookup. So many things you can do with the NITRO Forms Designer to make your InfoPath forms match. Now, as far as the workflows behind these forms, the Forms Designer is a whole subject in itself, and we could go more into depth in that in another demo or one-on-one. But also what you can do behind here is have the workflows and actions. So there's two kinds of things going on with our system. One is actions which are buttons that appear on the form, such as that script action, submit action, custom action that can show up right on the form itself or in the ribbon. Or you can have a workflow that runs based on a system event, such as when the item's created or certain timers reach or the due date is due. Let's look at some of these systems we have going on here. We have a new ticket, for example, coming up. I think he published it like this with all the stuff on it. But see, that's what the form looks like. If you wanted to publish it like that, it could look like that. This was an experiment of just playing around with colors and layout and everything. But you can see it can do a lot of cool stuff with this. Then you can put a ribbon up here, a button up here on the ribbon to run an action, or these buttons can run specific actions down here. You can do a lot with it. If you had the all open tickets, let's go to all open tickets view. Up on the list ribbon, you can put actions that run up there too. Now, all these run also in the modern UI. Let's see, where are we? They run in the modern UI as well as the classic UI. And one other thing that we can do when we're talking about the forms, we also have this portal concept where you can simplify it for people. and make it so that they are not having to go to back end to create forms. Here is a portal site that is separate, completely separate from that back end, except that it interacts with it. And now you're making it much simpler for the people. Let's look at this. That's one example. Here's another example. So when a person comes here and submits a ticket, you designed it in the forms designer, but you loaded it into this portal, and now the person can come in and make their request here, and then go and submit it to the same list as if they went to the back end. So I think with InfoPath forms, when you have multiple forms, you may have like an HR portal, you may have a IT portal, you may have an access request portal, and you're going to have different requests come up in here that are designed in that same portal, the forms designer, and would be able to be shown in a way that is much more friendly and interactive with the end user. Now you notice also there's a chat bot down here. This is a chat bot that person can use on the portal in order. This is AI services, part of NITRO Studio, so that you can come in here and start interacting with a chat bot you set up. You can also, when you do a knowledge-based search, that can do a natural language processing search. So it says, my printer's not working or something like that, and it would come up with it's things that are, pull out the keywords and do a search based on the keywords for natural language processing there. So given users this application portal, which is part of NITRO Studio, another way to present forms so that it's friendly to the users instead of that back end of SharePoint, you're going to have that capability. And, moving off InfoPath or other legacy solutions, this would give you some capabilities that to make it easy and presentable, gauge and empower users, as we say, versus the InfoPath or whatever methodology you're using. So we would work with you and say, okay, how's it going now? What are users used to? How much can they go from what they're doing now to what you would like them to do? These portal, and all this stuff is very, very flexible. We go into portal settings and you could change any of these logos, colors, and all that. Now, in addition to this, let me get that up. This also works. This is kind of a classic view. It also works in the modern UI. So let's see a modern UI portal looks something like this if you want. You go in and edit it. And Crow Canyon, that's us, has developed a whole number of parts. If you go into editing, you'll see that there's a number of Crow Canyon modern UI web parts that are shown here with our tiles, our arcs, our list search, and all that. But let's look at the screen here. If you're used to modern UI, if you're on 2013, 2016, you don't see this, but if you're on Office 365, you would. There's a number of Crow Canyon web parts that can be added to the page on the modern UI. So just making a point here that we're fully modern UI capable. And unless I show that in a webinar, people think we're not, but that's just one of the things you deal with when you're. So we are fully compatible with the modern UI, and showing that we have a number of web parts that will be displayed there. So it depends how you want your users to interact. If you're getting off InfoPath forms, one attractive way perhaps is to say, hey, we have these portals, we have a new way of you engaging and interacting with the system. You don't have to go to this clunky back end of SharePoint. You can go to this nice looking interface and then be able to create tickets or whatever. And these portals, these are so flexible in terms of how they look with your own branding and your own colors and everything that we have a lot of fun designing these. So, please, contact us and we'll talk to you about how to do a modern UI portal or even the classic portals that I was showing earlier, and just make it so it's easy for users to engage with the system and engage with the system and get their work done effectively and efficiently. Okay, so I think we're getting pretty much up on the I'd say 45 minutes or so I've been yakking here. So let's see if there's any questions. James, you there for questions?
I am. Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute in a couple places. But yeah, I'm just looking at a couple questions here. One of them is about the data residing in SQL. One of the benefits of InfoPath was that the data could reside in SQL. SQL Server, and the forms could store the data in SQL, and then the form could then update SQL. Does NITRO do this?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a moment. And we had that question come up one other realty company, actually. And so what happens is we can pull information in from SQL or any database to the form, save it in SharePoint. But since we've gotten, with this question and other ones we've run into like that, we're looking to expand our forms tool out so that it can be, where the data source of this is. Right now, it's tied very much to the SharePoint list controls over here. See, so really you're pulling a list control over when you put it in, like say additional contact or something. So now additional contact is a field inside of SharePoint. It's on the SharePoint list. If I went to the tickets list, you'd see additional contact, of course. It's a people or group field right here. So at this point, the controls are tied to SharePoint list. So the question at this point, the answer at this point in time on June 4th would be no, but give us 2-3 months and maybe yes. So we've had that question come up, and that's kind of adaptability. And we listen to our customers. We want to know what they need and what they want. And if that's an important concern, then we'll move in that direction. We already have the external data column right here, which will pull information. Let's put that in, external data column. So we'll configure an external data column, and it's going to do what query you want here, what query. We're going to get multiple records, like you're building a drop-down list, or a single record, you're just doing a field, and the connection string to that database, and the query you're going to run on it, and certain parameters, and how you're going to map the database column to the SharePoint column, and et cetera, et cetera. I like that. So you can do these mappings there. So that's pulling in data from the SQL database and putting it into the form and then the SharePoint list. So you can see it's a move in that direction that you're talking about there with that question. It hasn't been fully accomplished yet, but since we seeing this question arise now and then, we're looking to move this into not only configure to pull in, but also to push back and then display the data directly. One of the design goals we had at first was that these are really designed for SharePoint lists and columns, and therefore it's almost simpler in some ways for people just to go here. I mean, if you're not interested in SQL connectivity, just say, well, I don't have to do a data source for this. All I do is drag it over and it's done, right? Here's ticket source, assign date, all this stuff. You can just put it in there and it's done. I don't have to worry about connecting it to a back-end data control, which is one of the it goes either way. Some people say that's complicated to do, or it's an added step anyway, and it makes the, so it's something you'd be interested in discussing more, if that is, should we loosen up the forms designer such that it can go beyond SharePoint list columns into database columns? It's an interesting question. And I think, we're exploring it and seeing like what's the ramifications to the designer, because we want to keep it at a certain level of user friendliness without overcomplicated. It's one that, people, no slight on Power Apps at all. It's a great tool, but one of the things we do run into is people find it sometimes complicated to use. It's like you don't have to be a developer, but it sure helps to know what kind of queries to write and how to pull things in and all that kind of stuff. So, there are advantages and disadvantages to both kind of sides of things to it. We also can write custom scripts. If you want to go beyond low code, no code, you go into custom JavaScripts and put those in here. And also our actions can run a workflow that would take data from this and then write it out to a database, from the share. But we're still tied to the SharePoint list column, so the data doesn't reside exclusively in the SQL database. I hope that answers your question, but if not, then let me know and we'll, explore with you some more about that, okay?
And we also have another question here, if you're willing to take it.
I see it. Saving data to external sources SQL is a big requirement for it.
No. The one before it, but that's okay.
All right.
The question was, how does this product interact with our SharePoint Online environment? Is this deployed as an add-in or SharePoint framework, or does it run as a wrapper from the Crocani network?
It runs inside your Office 365 tenancy, or if you have a SharePoint farm, it runs in your farm. All the web parts are put in there. Now, there is an aspect to the NITRO Studio where we're and this is on Office 365, where we use the Azure cloud as a integral part of our NITRO Studio to control workflows and email synchronizations and things like that are not available when you're running in the CSOM client-side model inside of the browser where Office 365. In Office 365, there's some elements of the server you obviously can't connect to the server directly like you can on a SharePoint farm. So therefore, some things have to be put out into Azure and run there. We run our licensing up there. We run our workflows up there as Azure, but it's in the Microsoft Azure. It's like our Azure instance, but it's Microsoft Azure. And in a on farm premise though, that's not necessary. It can be run because we can contact the server to get timer jobs and things like that. That we can run almost everything on premises in that one environment of on premises. You know, the funny thing about Azure's cloud. Office 365 is cloud. Cloud is cloud in a lot of ways. You know, I mean, there's once you're up in the cloud, is things are spread all over the place and a lot of different data centers, different instances. But anyway, we go with Office 365 as much as possible inside your tenant, and only what's necessary to provide the functionality required in workflows and email synchronization and licensing. We use our Azure database. Now, there was something about saving data to an external source. So you'd fill in the form and save it to an external data source. That could be done with our scripting, the custom scripting, where you say, okay, take these, say you had a group of a bunch of fields here, and you say, okay, let's script that so that it writes out to Oracle. We do a lot of that with what a purchase order system, where we have a purchase request, and then those items that are being purchased have to be output in some format and then pushed over to a financial or accounting or ERP system for ordering like that. Or we have asset inventory systems where we're writing back and forth to the asset inventory. If someone adds a new computer, they can enter it in our system or the other system, and they interact back and forth like that. So there's ways of with asset management, a lot of time they're filling out our form here. Say it's an asset management form for some reason, and maybe it's changed where it's located, or the IP address has changed or whatever. So you could save it, and then it would write it out to the database through scripting. Thing.
Yeah, I think that was for.
Please wait when using the forms. The please wait was when I was opening up the forms designer, and not when I open up the form itself, right? Let's see if it gets. This is a dev environment. Who knows? But let's see if it says please wait here. Yeah. Please wait while loading. Well, that's a dev environment, but see, it has all these buttons up here and everything like that. So sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, let's look at some of our other systems. They probably load a little. Let's see, new request. Let's see if it does it there. They didn't say please wait. So it depends on the system and the connectivity. It's also Office 365 depends on your bandwidth and your connection to the internet and all those things too. So we try and make them load as quick as possible. And one of the advantages of our NITRO forms versus other tools, frankly, is that we only load the fields that are needed inside that form. We don't, other solutions such as injecting JavaScript, that's a JavaScript injection methodology is another way of doing it. That one loads every column and then only shows the forms that you decided on your forms. That's not what we do at all. Some of the older solutions do that. We only contact and load the forms that you have specified on that form, the columns you have specified on that form, the fields you have specified on that form is what I mean to say. So if you don't have category on here, it's not going to load category. But the other older style was to load everything and then only show what's there. And that took some more time. So we've definitely speeded up the loading of the forms by adopting a whole different technology than injected JavaScript is what the old method is called. This is just using a CSOM, a browser, to contact and bring in only only the data that's necessary. Of course, there's a new request form, so no data is coming in. So let's look at an open request form. Well, some data is coming in like lookup fields and things like that, but let's look at one that has some data filled in, and it's going to pull in information from there. See, it took a little longer to try to read it, but not that long. So it all depends on what's loading and how much information you need. So now that we're coming up on the hour, I really appreciate everybody attending this webinar. If you have more questions, you can pop them into the question box and we'll keep answering them. Otherwise, you can contact us. I really encourage people to get going on the InfoPath replacement project, to look seriously, like I said, put your toe in the water, or maybe wade in slowly, and start to make moves in that direction, and we'll help you out in whatever way we can. I mean, NITRO Studio could be the solution, but also just working with our partners and working with maybe other tools that are out there can help you move and get a plan in place to do this. And we've talked with people who have 100 InfoPath forms, and people have 10,000 InfoPath forms. So some people have 20,000. So it's really where you're at as far as your organization, your culture, your how much initiative there is. But I think the time's running out myself. I think even if you have 2 years, it's not very long. And there's also no reason to be hesitant and start to be stuck on older, like my old Civic 2012 Civic. As a kind of an example, is why not get the new stuff that your users will benefit from and your organization will benefit from in order to move forward. If you're not, your competitors are, as they say, right? So, the more efficient you can bring using SharePoint and Office 365 and move away from older technologies like InfoPath or email or spreadsheets that are not so efficient and causing difficulties, the better. The sooner the better for all that, and just get over that cultural user adoption hump and see, the bright new world on the other side, right? So to speak. So anyway, anything else coming up for questions there, Dan? I think we got answered most of them so far that I can see, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else at the moment.
Okay, so we do have free NITRO trials, 30-day trials. You can download that on our website or write to us directly, and we'll get you going on it. We do provide support during the trial and guidance. The pricing, we can get you pricing on NITRO Studio, and we can also talk to you just on a one-to-one basis about your whatever, whether it's InfoPath replacement project or just you want to move, you want to use your SharePoint and Office 365 in a more effective way. We can talk to you about how we can help you in that regard. So again, thank you everyone for attending, and appreciate that, and we'll hope to hear from you, and we'll do some follow-up. We'll have a recording available on the website, and everybody have a good day, a good week, and hope to hear from you. Thank you.